name is Dandi Ramadan with last students number 021, and I'm going to be telling you about phonetics and phonology, and also with the difference between the two. Let's start with the definition. So, what is phonetics? Phonetics is the study of the characteristics of speech. Sounds, it is made up of the symbols, both familiar such as just a letter B or just a letter M, and unfamiliar such as the ones you see on the slide from our alphabet. Now, what is the phonology? Phonology is the description of the systems and patterns of speech sounds in a language. Basically, it is the rules so that every speaker of a language knows about the patterns of the language unconsciously. So it's the things you know about language that you don't realize that you know. An example of one such rule would be the understanding that the words ate and butter have the letter T, but they are pronounced differently based off other letters around them. The T in ate is combined with an H, whereas the T in butter is combined with another T, and they have different sounds, and therefore when they are spelled out phonetically they have different symbols. So what's the difference? Phonetic deals more with the study sounds of the knowledge, without knowledge with the language spoken, while phonology is more about the patterns of sounds and the rules that are unconsciously internalized by the speakers of the language. When you are studying phonetics, you could study it for a language that you don't even know, whereas with phonology you have to understand the language and the pronunciation in order to fully understand phonology. I found this handy dandy chart that elaborates further. So phonetics belongs to descriptive linguistics, whereas phonology belongs to theoretical linguistics. Phonetics studies the production, transmission, reception of sound, whereas phonology studies the different patterns of sounds in the different languages. And in phonetics, it doesn't study one particular language. It can be applied to any language, whether you know it or whether you don't. Whereas phonology, there's nuance, and so it's therefore or needs to be applied to a specific language where you can't really study it really unless you know that language. Another thing that will help us understanding the difference between phonetics and phonology is to understand the difference between our to understand why the missing understanding what an allophone is, where a phoneme, they are the smallest meaning distinguishing sounds unit in the abstract representation of the sounds of language. So it's basically the letter in the alphabet chess, basically what we are familiar with seeing, whereas an allophone, our phonetic units that are closely related to each other, so they are one of similar phones that belong to the same phoneme. Basically a variant of that letter, so it would be the T with the small h over it or the N with the extra little kind of kickstand of the curved looking Z in my opinion. So it would be allophones that denote that there is difference in pronunciation. So a good example of the difference between a phoneme and allophone is to use the T as an example. In the word tar or eight, we'll use eight again. The allophones of the phonetic symbol in the word tar gonna be the T with the small like exponent looking H, or the word eight, the symbol is just the T with the kind of symbol under it. There are closely related because they are represented by the same letter in the English language, but they have different symbols for how they are pronounced. So further examples, the phoneme T is this handy chart that I found, another handy chart. So T, when it comes at the beginning of the word top, has a gain that added 8 almost underscored H sound to it. Stop, it's more of that holistic T sound that we're familiar with. Its double T, it has different symbol based off what comes before it. What comes after a consonant, that comes afterwards, it's not as you see. Here where is kitten because there is a vowel afterwards that also changes the sound. So these are all examples, the allophones, the different sounds that the T, the letter T can make within the word. So the phoneme is the T, what C in the words, whereas the allophone is whether we are going to pronounce it phonetically. It's going to depend on where it is in sense in the word, whether kinds of beginning, whether there comes at the end, with what kind of around it, and that would kind of direct us to which allophones. You should use for the phonetic spelling. In conclusion, phonetics is the study of the phonological rules that speakers of a language inherently understand. So phonetics is something that you can kind of take with you when you are trying to study other languages. Those rules are that understanding, and whereas the phonology, you have to understand the language to really be able to get the nuance and know the pronunciation. Where then when we're talking about allophones, they are derivatives of phonemes, so they come from phonemes. They are a variation of phonemes because in the English language, they are represented by the same letter when we write them out. But when we are writing the phonetic spelling, there are differences again depending on where they come in that word. So I hope you are able to difference between phonetics and phonology.
Hello everyone, my name is Abzal Sandria and my last student number is 019, and in this part of the video I would like to talk about phonetics and phonemics. Phonetics is the branch of linguistics that deals with the study of speech sounds. It involves the analysis and the description of sound of human speech, including how these sounds are produced, transmitted, and perceived. Phonetic is crucial in understanding the sound of language and how they are used to convey meaning in different languages. So there's three main branches of phonetics. Number one, articulatory phonetics. This branch focuses on the physical properties of speech sounds, specifically how they are produced by the human vocal tract. Articulatory phoneticians study the movements and positions of the speech organs, such as the tongue, the lips, and the vocal cords during speech production. Number two, acoustic phonetics. Acoustic phonetics examines the acoustic properties of speech sounds, including their frequency, amplitude, and duration. It deals with the transmission of speech sounds as a wave through the air and how they are received by the human ear. Number three, auditory phonetics. Auditory phonetics is concerned with how speech sounds are perceived by the human auditory system. It investigates how the ear processes sound waves and how the brain interprets them as distinct speech sounds. So the goal of phonetics is that number one, to describe and classify all possible speech sounds in human languages. 2. Understand the physiological and acoustic mechanism involved in speech production. 3. Analyze the variations in speech sounds across different languages and dialects. And 4. Explore the universal aspect of human speech production and perception. Phonemics is another branch of linguistics that deals with the abstract mental representations of speech sounds in a language. It focuses on phonemes, which are the smallest distinctive units of sound in a language. Phonemics explores how native speakers perceive and use these phonemes to convey meaning. The goal of phonemics: number one, to identify the phonemes in a language. Number two, to determine which sound distinctions are meaningful or distinctive in that language. Number three, understand the rule governing the distribution and combination of phonemes.
Hello, my name is Nawarum Ipina Rahda with last student number 023, and today I will explain about minimal pairs and sets. The linguist can use the corpus to discover regularities in the language. One way of doing this by finding minimal pairs and sets. So, what is a minimal pair? A minimal pair is made up of two forms such as word, phrases, and sentences that contain the same number of sound segments. Display only on phonetic difference that occurs at the same place in the forms and differ in meaning. They are used to demonstrate that two tones constitute two separate phonemes in the language. So let me give you some example. Cat and pat, wat and yat, kill and gill. So that's a minimal pair. These words both have three sound segments, differ only in the initial consonant and mean different things. The second one is a minimal set. So what is a minimal set? A minimal set is made up of more than two forms contained by words, phrases, sentences that differ in meaning, contain the same number of sound segments, and display only one phonetic difference, which occurs at the same place in the form. A minimal set is used to demonstrate that the phonological element under consideration is phonemic. Let me give you some example. Cat, pat, rat, bat, and fat. Alright, the next one is complementary distribution. So, complementary distribution means that each of series of sounds occurs in different phonetic contexts, and these sounds never contrast with each other. Sounds that are in complementary distribution with each other are allophone of the same phonemes. On the other hand, P and K, as well as the other initial consonant that occur before at in the minimal set above, are all different phonemes. The P and K phonemes show an overlapping distribution. What is overlapping distribution? Overlapping distribution is characteristic of different phones that appear in most of the same phonetic environment. And the last one, we have substitution frame. Substitution frame is a form that has a slot that can be filled in with different items such as at, and is used to identify different phonemes.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Bunga Shani Anarifana. I would like to explain about free variation in phonology. In linguistics, free variation is a phenomenon in which two different allophones of the same phoneme or sound can occur in a given position in a word, depending on the context. This means that both allophones are equally acceptable and there is no fixed rule that governs their use. In other words, the same phoneme can have different contexts, with no grammatical or semantic consequences. Free variation is often observed in certain language areas such as vowel reduction in the final syllable of a word or consonant aspiration in Japanese and Chinese. It can also occur in other aspects of a language phonology, such as the tone of a word or its vowel quality in some languages. Sometimes two phonemes may alternate more or less freely with each other without changing the meaning of the word. In fact, there is a song that illustrates this point, saying that some people pronounce their word potato as potato and some as potato. For the spiritus of English, the word tomato is tomato and tomato, respectively. That is, no matter which way you pronounce this word, the meaning remains the same. Does this mean that E and A are not distinct? That they are not two different phonemes? Potato potato and tomato are not minimal pairs. Each pair has the same number of segments and each item of each pair do not differ in meaning. Yet, an egg can be shown to form minimal pairs for other groups of words, such as hat in the sentence I had you and hat in the sentence I like to order a hot coffee. Cap in the sentence she wears a cap and mask, and cap in the sentence one there's a cup coming. One meaning like potato or tomato is represented by more than one phonemic form. The different pronunciations are the variation of the word in question. In the case of variation, the different pronunciation do not signal a difference in meaning. The pronunciation chosen is optional, not obligatory as complementary distribution. In summary, free variation is an important concept in linguistics because it shows that not all sounds have to be pronounced in the same way every time they are used. It also demonstrates that a language phonological system is complex and flexible, allowing for variation and change over time.
Hello everyone, my name is Dimas Nahiza Hamada and my last student number is 025. And now I would like to explain about naming the phonemes. Naming the phonemes refers to the process of identifying and naming the sounds of a language called phoneme. In a linguistic context, naming the phonemes refers to giving a specific label or name to each phoneme in a language. Naming the phonemes involves giving labels or names to each phoneme, such as voiceless bilabial plosive for P and voiced alveolar nasal for N. For example, there are phonemes like P, B, T, D, K, G, F, V, and so on. Each of these phonemes has a unique characteristic that distinguishes it from the others. The importance of naming the phonemes is to understand and categorize language sounds in a linguistic context. It is an important part of phonological analysis, which is the study of sound systems in language. In this way, linguists can understand how these sounds are used in word formation and language articulation. Alright, now I'll try to give a general explanation of the concept. A phoneme is the smallest unit of sound in a language that can distinguish the meaning of a word. For example, the phonemes P and B are two distinct phonemes because they can change the significance of the word, as in the word pat and bat. Normally, phonemes are labeled using certain phonetic symbols. For example, the P phoneme can be labeled as P, and the B phoneme can be marked as B. Keep in mind that naming phonemes is an unusual term in linguistics or languages.
Hello, my name is Vikariri Sevira and my last student number is 020. I'm going to explain about broad and narrow transcription. In the first stage of a linguistic study done in the field, the linguist writes down each utterance in as much phonetic detail as can be perceived. At this stage, as many symbols such as diacritics and specializers will be used as needed to transcribe the linguist's perceptions of the language. Such a recording system is called a narrow transcription or a phonetic transcription. The narrow transcription will show both distinctive and undistinctive features. A broad transcription or a phonemic transcription does not include non-distinctive features. Many details of pronunciation are left out of a broad transcription. For instance, the word feet would be written as fit in broad transcription and pit in the narrow transcription. The narrow transcription of pit indicates the non-distinctive feature in English of aspiration. The broad transcription is restricted to sound distinctions that are meaningful for native speakers. The linguist cannot write a broad transcription until the phonemes of the language have been discovered. It's common to distinguish between two kinds of transcription based on how many details the transcribers decide to ignore. First, narrow transcription captures as many aspects of a specific pronunciation as possible and ignores as few details as possible. Using the diatypes provided by the IPA, it's possible to make very subtle distinctions between sounds. Second, broad transcription. For phonemic transcription, ignore as many details as possible, capturing only enough aspects of a pronunciation to allow how that word differs from other words in the language. The key factor in a broad transcription is meaning. If a pronunciation detail can change the meaning of words in a language, it must be included a broad transcription of that language. For example, consider the difference between the vowels in leaf and lift. For Canadian English, a narrow transcription would note the difference between the E and the I. So would a broad transcription. For Canadian French, a narrow transcription would note the difference between E and I, but a broad transcription would not. Leaf and live do not mean different things. A broad transcription would ignore the difference and write both as leaf.